Welcome to today's webinar, everybody. The why, what, and how of lifting up diverse family voices in Head Start programs. This webinar is a special presentation brought to you by ParentGauge and Ready for K. As experts in the area of family engagement in Head Start, our two teams have been working together to bring the power of enhanced data-driven decision-making to your programs. Our tools serve different purposes, but are strongly complementary when it comes to both implementing and measuring your parent engagement efforts. Today, we will explore how integrating family voice helps programs meet Head Start performance standards and the unique role that program leaders play in this process. As we get started, we do want to acknowledge the proposed budget cuts to Head Start funding are heavy on our minds, and we will go into how you can help at the end of this webinar. A couple of housekeeping notes as you're getting settled in. You are entering in mute, but this is interactive. So if you have any questions or comments you want to add, go ahead and use that chat functionality at the bottom of your Zoom window to contribute. This session is being recorded, and the recording and slides will be available on the webpage after the webinar. And you'll also receive a certificate of attendance via email. So at this time, we invite you to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Love to see your name, where you're chiming in from, how many years you've been working with children and families. And Fran from Parent Powered is going to add those years up and see how many years of collective experience we have in this session today. Myself, I'm Sandy Oseguera. I'm NHSA's Senior Data Product Manager, zooming in today from Salt Lake City, Utah. I've spent the last 5.5 years in data analytics, but actually spent 5 years prior to that as a family service worker. So I feel like that gave me a lot of insight into how our particular products are useful for the field and what the user experience should look like. I spend a lot of time with NHSA working on data products like ParentGauge, if you're familiar with that. And with that, I'll turn it over to my co-presenter, Mallory.
Thank you, Sandy. Hi, everybody. I'm Mallory Swartz. I'm the Senior Director of Research and Evaluation at Parent Powered, and I lead our research evaluation and continuous improvement work. And I serve as a thought partner and a collaborator across the organization in product development and impact communication. I've been an applied researcher in family engagement and early childhood for over 20 years, and I've worked at family-focused organizations such as Start Early, Fred Rogers Productions, Brazelton Touchpoint Center, and I also had the privilege of serving as co-principal investigator for the Office of Head Start National Center on Parent, Family, and Community Engagement. Before we move on with our presentation, we wanted to acknowledge something very important here. You'll see that we do not have a parent from Head Start presenting with us. We thought about this deeply and decided to first lay this foundation around family voice with all of you. And as we continue our learning journey around family voice, we'll work intentionally and thoughtfully with our program partners and parents to engage in co-design and co-delivery for future presentations whenever we can. And we know that this process takes time and we really want to do it right. So we wanted to just acknowledge that before we got started. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about our learning objectives. We know that family engagement is everyone's business, meaning that in a Head Start program, everyone contributes. However, program leaders have a unique, multifaceted, and important role to play. They must lay the foundation and set the vision for staff to engage with families effectively. In order to truly engage parents as partners, leaders must advocate for the inclusion of diverse family voices throughout the program and ensure that organizational culture, policies, procedures, and practices provide staff with the time, guidance, and resources to engage in reflective practice and learn about each and every family's strengths, their needs, their hopes, their dreams, experiences, and importantly, their cultures. So our focus today will be building knowledge about family voice research and what's important to the families of young children. We'll also explore ways to gather and lift up family voices based on research and some real-world examples, and do a bit of reflecting on how you might begin to apply these learnings in your programs. First, we will do some level setting around this work, including a discussion of how this webinar connects to Head Start standards and the Parent, Family, and Community Engagement Framework. We'll explore definitions of family voice and look at our values and attitudes around working with families. We'll then move on to building an understanding of why incorporating diverse family voices, including lived experiences, into program practices and governance is essential to both positive family and child outcomes. Then we'll do a little digging into what we know about what's important to parents of young children based on the research, based on our own work with ParentGauge and Ready for K, and we'll ask you to share some of what you've learned in your own work. And then we'll begin to explore how program administrators and leaders can lay the foundation for authentically incorporating family voice into their programs. We'll talk about some innovative approaches that we've learned about from the field. And finally, we'll wrap up by hearing more of your thoughts and leaving you with a few take-home resources that you can explore and try out. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sandy to take us through some context and level setting around family voice. Sandy, all
Thank
yours.
you, Mallory. So the Head Start program performance standards are something we're all very familiar with, right? We need to meet this criteria to run our programs. And while these are requirements, the standards are written purposefully to allow your program to tailor strategies and practices for your unique communities. In that vein, we can see multiple areas where listening and working together with families is necessary to create those individualized program strategies. One that we're very familiar with, I'm sure, is 1302.50, family engagement. Programs are encouraged to develop two-generation approaches that address the needs of our family. We know that we need to listen to families to identify what those needs are. In 1302.52, family partnership services, programs are required to offer individualized family partnership services that collaborate with families to identify interests, needs, and aspirations related to family engagement outcomes. In 1302.34, parent and family engagement in education and child development services, center-based and family childcare programs must structure education and child development services, recognizing parents' roles as children's lifelong educators, and ultimately encourage parents to engage in their child's education. It also points out that a program has to offer opportunities for parents and family members to be involved in the program's education services. In each of these standards, programs are reminded of the value of family voice in identifying a family's unique needs and interests, but also in developing positive change within the systems that serve them. Moving into another familiar document, for those of us engaged with PFCE efforts in particular, the PFCE framework was developed to inspire the spirit of collaboration with families and our communities in identifying and addressing their needs and how to meet them effectively. As we review the PFCE framework, we can see how each pillar benefits from the use of and emphasizes the importance of family voice. In considering program foundations, program leadership, everyone on the call today is attending this webinar because you recognize that listening to our families can shape your program's goal. Continuous quality improvement is informed by listening to our families and how we continue to learn and improve our program. We know that our families are the key in creating effective goals. The framework calls out the idea that to create lasting change, Head Start leaders, all of you, advocate for the inclusion of diverse family voices at all levels of the program, including in formal decision-making groups like parent committees and policy councils. In program impact areas, high-quality environments are called out specifically to support cultural and linguistic responsiveness, promote open and regular communication, and provide a sense of support to families. Family partnerships are especially important to create a reciprocal relationship where both program staff and family benefit. These partnerships are not only beneficial in relation to each other, but also in supporting desired family outcomes and other macro-level program impact areas. Family outcomes intuitively requires the use of family voice and also strengthens it by identifying that families are both the lifelong educators and learners, as well as our connection back to our communities. When parents and families are listened to and empowered to share their voice, desired family outcomes are strengthened. As you listen to the rest of the presentation, you'll hear more about families serving as advocates and leaders and how family voice plays a significant role in promoting that family outcome. Moving into the child outcomes, many of the desired child outcomes come back to what we know programs and families want to achieve together. We know that families want their children to be safe, learning and developing, and school ready, right? That's the core of what we're doing here. The PFCE framework identifies that positive goal-oriented relationships improve wellness by reducing isolation and stress for both families and staff. When these relationships focus on shared goals for children, staff and families can experience the support that comes from knowing that they are all on the same team. We know that with collaboration, programs and families are more likely to achieve favorable child outcomes and impact other program goals. So all of these pieces working together ultimately support the aim of equity, inclusiveness, cultural and linguistic responsiveness, which can be integrated throughout the system. Overall, the PFCE framework states that families and programs working towards these goals together define meaningful opportunities, recognize barriers, and measure progress together. Moving into the National Center's PFCE materials guidance for supervisors, we find our strength-based attitudes tool. This is used to help us define where individual attitudes come from. They're shaped by experiences, beliefs, and assumptions. And we want our staff to exercise strength-based attitudes to support the belief that all families can make progress and that together we can strive for the best outcomes possible. Strength-based attitudes remind us that all families have strengths and each family has unique strengths that can be the foundation of our discussions and partnership. Families are the first and most important teachers of their children. Children's healthy development relies on sensitive and nurturing interactions within the family and the community. Families are our partners with a critical role in their child's development. They make choices every day that affect a child's development and learning. And ultimately, families are the experts on their own children. They understand their children best, they understand their family dynamics best, and they want to make the best decisions for their child's well-beings. Families' contributions are important and valuable. Being open to a family's suggestions and requests helps us do our best on behalf of their child. We can encourage effective partnerships when we invite their expertise and listen to their priorities. So now that we've reviewed some familiar resources and how the concept of family voice is already included in the standards and resources you're currently using, let's turn it back over to Mallory to go into how we define family voice.
Thank you so much, Sandy. So I wanted to share a little bit about a review of the research that we did. We were really thinking about how across our field is family voice defined. And so we noticed some common themes and how people were defining it. At the center of most definitions were a focus on advancing equity, shared decision-making, leadership, trust, and relationships. Also important were capacity building, valuing lived experience, and empowerment. So what I'd like to do now is if we could pause for a moment here, just so you have a chance to take a look at this. Look at the word cloud, think about how this relates to how you define family voice in your program. And also let us know, what do you think might be missing from this? So let's take a minute, we'll just sit and reflect a bit, give you a chance to look at it, and then please share your ideas in the chat so we can share some of the ideas that come in. So again, think about how you define family voice and or anything that might be missing from this that you don't see here. Thank you, Janie. Thank you, Felicia. I see opportunities and respect and culture, family choice. Here they all come. Partnership. Thanks, guys. This is amazing. Pride, trust, family wellness. I see trust again, a huge one. Yes, being able to share concerns and celebrations. Thank you. Resilience, collaboration. Yep. Accountability, partnership. These are wonderful, everybody. Thank you. Diversity, trust. Oh, I just got an idea. Maybe we can create a new word cloud once we look at all the chat. Maybe we could do that after. This is so wonderful. Sandy, anything else that you want to call out here? Social drivers of health. Thank you.
Yeah, no, these are great. I love the advocating for yourself, culture, right? That's huge. Because again, when we're talking about specific family voices, right? Culture is important to understand.
Absolutely. Creating community too. I love that unity. This is wonderful. I feel like I want to do this all day. Reflective listening. This is great, everybody. Trauma informed, so important. Bonding, understanding, friendships. Wonderful harmony. Love that. Opportunities to use their talents. These are wonderful. Promote genuine interest and concern. Thank you, Irma. Love. Oh, love it. Building that lifetime partnership. Well, this is wonderful, you all. Thank you so much for sharing. Keep sharing if you want. Hope. I'm going to have to focus and I'm going to just keep reading them all. I love these. But we wanted to share also that we see Family's Voice also as providing intentional and regular opportunities for families to share their needs, their wants, and experiences, and to build relationships and inspire positive change within the systems that serve them. Parent voice and leadership are key for systems, policies, and programs to be equitable and effective for all families. So we'll talk about that a bit more in the following slides. And thank you again for sharing all these wonderful, wonderful thoughts with us. So before we move on to the why and kind of the research behind all of this, we wanted to share an example that we found particularly helpful, excuse me, for thinking about family voice. This comes from a report from Michigan focused on the home visiting field, and they describe a continuum when it comes to family voice and leadership. So what I found the most interesting, and I hope you all do too, is that family voice is not just seen as like an end goal, right? It's not synonymous with leadership. Rather, the authors state that as you move across the continuum, family voice grows in complexity and impact and is integrated at both the individual and systems levels. So at one end of the continuum is involvement, where families participate in activities or groups, but their contributions have guardrails and are often directed and defined for them. So they may build relationships and connections, but they're not necessarily often as invested in the goals or growth of the program itself. As we move along, next is engagement, which is focused on actually using parent voice and experience to inform decisions about the program and systems. And here parents are often a bit more invested. And then empowerment is next, and it's seen as active and ongoing. And it's a process focused on parents trusting their own abilities for growth and impact. And here, parents' capacity is further developed through strategies like coaching, mentoring, peer-to-peer networks, and skill development based on parents' own goals. And finally, at the other end of the continuum is leadership, where families' voices and representation are integral to and expected in the program. Here, parents use their experience, their skills, and their strengths to effect change and actively lead. We'll share the full report with you in the slide deck, and I believe that Fran, thank you so much, already shared it in the chat, but don't worry, if you end up missing it, we will also share after. So we're gonna come back a little bit later to this example from Michigan and talk about it a bit more, but this was kind of the overview for you all. So on the next slide, now that we've done some context and level setting, and we've begun to kind of build this shared definition of family voice, we want to briefly turn to the why. So what does the research say about why it's important to incorporate family voice into our programs? So Sandy talked about the PFCE framework at the beginning. That's all, as we know, based in research and steeped in research over the last 10, 15 years. In addition, recent research across many fields like health, education, and home visiting show that incorporating family voice leads to positive outcomes. Research on community organizing in particular further highlights that when non-dominant families are given the opportunity to share their knowledge and expertise and help shape policies and procedures, that can lead to more positive outcomes for programs, children, and families. All of this requires that program leaders lay that foundation that we've been talking about for families and staff to grow their capacity around how to promote parent leadership. We'll talk about this later a bit more when we talk about the how to do this, but first we wanted to just pull out a couple of important things from this that we learned from our research. Basically, when programs work to shift power and voice to families from diverse communities, honor families' lived experience and their expertise, and engage families as co-creators and leaders, families are able to build their capacity in a lot of different ways. These include their ability to form social connections and advocate for their children. They're also able to build their resilience and self-efficacy and confidence, some of which came up in the chat when you all were sharing. Finally, research has shown that this enhanced capacity for parents and bringing together of diverse individuals improves parent-child relationships, children's success in school and life, program quality, and educational equity. So now we're going to move on to the what. Now that we've covered, why it's important, we want to move on to what is important to families of young children. And in order to talk about this, we took a dive into research over the past 8 years, including some studies during and after the pandemic. And parents of young children cited a variety of things as important to them and their goals for themselves and their families. As we were reviewing the research, we considered questions like, what are parents saying about what's important to them in early childhood? What are their hopes and dreams for their children? What do they want to learn more about? We wanted to share with you here some of the high-level takeaways from the literature and reports that we reviewed. One thing that I really want to note before I go on and share those highlights are that these findings are aggregated across diverse samples of families. A next really important step would be to dig more deeply into research with particular groups or communities, and to consider how these things are the same or different across and also within those communities themselves. But a few things that we learned overall are that parents care deeply about children's safety, health, and well-being. They want their children to find success, stability, and fulfillment in school and life. Social emotional development and academic outcomes are also important to parents. Research indicated that many parents are even more concerned about their social emotional development than they were prior to the pandemic. Some of parents' highest priorities were making sure that their kids are loved, safe, fed, and healthy, and able to get to school. Parents also said that they wanted to learn more about self-care strategies, including those to help with stress and regulating their own emotions. They also wanted to learn about routines for supporting positive behavior and family interactions, and we're looking to learn more about family finances. In addition to reviewing the research, we took a look at our own data from Ready for K families. And for those of you who are not familiar with our work, Ready for K is an evidence-based family engagement curriculum delivered to parents by text. Every quarter, we survey our parents. We asked a variety of questions around different aspects of development and parenting and what they find most valuable about our product and resources, and what are the things that are important to them. And over the last several years, we received tens of thousands of open-ended responses, with almost 8,800 just in our last survey. And so we took a dive into this data, and the themes listed on this slide that you see here were emerged as the most common, the most prevalent in parents' responses. And as you'll see, they're quite similar to what we found in the overarching research. Parents especially appreciated ideas to support their children's development. For example, one parent said, "I appreciate the ideas on helping to get through difficult behaviors and on child development." And they also appreciated reminders to take care of themselves and the helpfulness of community and social supports. For example, one parent said, "I appreciate the reminders to slow down and take care of myself and to enjoy my kids and where they are now." Sandy, would you like to share a little bit about what ParentGauge families have said?
Of course. Thank you, Mallory. Yeah, so with ParentGauge, the main functionality is an guided interview between teachers and family service workers and the parents in their program. Our users conduct approximately 40,000 interviews a year, where parents are asked questions like, "Tell me how the program has helped you and your family." And then when we review those aggregated responses across the board, most parents are talking about the staff at their program. They bring up how comfortable staff makes them feel, how they helped create a welcoming environment in the beginning, and how important those connections are. You know, they regularly talk about how they gained resources through them and how they met these other things that they needed, but they're always talking about how staff was the entryway into these important connections. When we ask our users, or when our users ask parents, what could the program do differently to better help you and your family? One of the most common responses was more interaction with other families. Our families overwhelmingly tell us how important their community is to them, from the staff at their programs to the other families attending their programs, when we give them an avenue to share their opinions. And that's something that I think we see when we look at other data as well outside of ParentGauge, right? Community is important. It came up when we were looking at those word clouds as well. And in turn, you know, we see how programs use those responses to inform their program strategies and goals. So again, this is at the forefront, I know, of your minds already, and we're just bringing it back to what our parents are saying, how are they saying things differently in different avenues, and going from there. So earlier we asked how many years you've been working with children and families. Fran added up all of the years of experience, and between everybody on the call today, we bring over, is that 1,600 years of working with children and families. That's a huge number, right? Way more than any one of us will ever have on our own. Now, given that lengthy amount of experience, we want to hear from your perspective too. What's important to the families in your program? Are you seeing similar trends to what we're seeing on our end? Are you seeing something different? Go ahead and chat them in, and let's take a look at that together. Acceptance. Yeah, that's a huge one, right? Our families want to feel accepted. They want to walk into a program and feel welcomed. Trust, definitely. That came up with the word cloud too, right? Community, being accepted, communication, that's huge, right? That's the pivoting point into everything is communication. Love that, right? Everything can be touched with love and to be made better there. Being included, connections with teachers and their community, right? Lots of similar things that we've been talking about, right? This is something that we see across the board, wherever our programs are, whatever our roles are, we're seeing our parents want trust, they want communication, they want to build relationships, culturally accepted. That's huge, right? Especially depending on where you are in the country, that means different things. More participation. Yes. I hear that from both staff and parents, right? We want participation. Their child's happiness. That's a great one, Victoria, right? That's the end goal for everybody, is we want our children to be happy, both program-wise and parent-wise. We can feel that. Great. These are such great responses. Again, Mallory, same thing where I'm like, I want to just keep reading these and putting these together. Feel free to chime in if you have anything there. Next up, we are going to explore, what do we do with this feedback, right? We're all hearing it. We're all gathering that feedback from our parents. What do we do with that next? So we're going to hand it back over to Mallory for that.
Yes, I mean, I really would love to just heart every single one of these, which I'm so happy you can do in the chat, but I can't do that while I'm presenting. But if I could, I would heart every single one of these. So thank you all so much for sharing. Yeah, so basically we've done some level setting. We've talked about the why, we've talked a little bit about the what, and we're barely scratching the surface, but we want to be able to tell our story. So this leads to the how, right? So we'll consider the question, how can program administrators and leaders lay the foundation for authentically inviting, advocating for, and incorporating family voice into their programs? So we'll first discuss some of the ways this shows up in Head Start programs, and then we'll share some innovative approaches from the field that we learned about and want to share with you. So the first piece we're going to share, there is a lot on the slide, so I'm just going to put that right out there. We know that. Again, we're going to be sharing it with you later, and so we wanted it to be full for you to take a look at. But I'm going to, don't worry too much about taking it all in. But basically, we all know, everyone in this call knows, right? Family engagement is part of Head Start's DNA. In other words, it's been part of Head Start since it was born. And over the past decade, the National Center on Parent, Family, and Community Engagement has done a really amazing job creating resources that highlight specific practices around family engagement. And many of these focus on parent leadership. For example, the relationships-based competencies, or as we affectionately call the RBCs, were published several years ago, and they highlight many examples of supervisory and leadership practices that promote parent leadership in all aspects of the program, including parent committees, policy councils, decision-making, governance, and community partnerships. Furthermore, the relationship between supervisors and staff can model how we want staff to interact with families. It can kind of serve as a parallel process. And this has been a really important basis for bringing families' voices to the table in Head Start. More recently, the National Center provided a new resource on how to engage parents as co-designers. And so this creates opportunities for parents to share their voices and contribute to the program in ways that matter to the families themselves. The National Center and a group of former Head Start parents engaged in a co-design process to reflect on effective family engagement from the parents' perspective. Some of the recommendations that emerged from the parents themselves focused on the importance of reflection, shifting staff mindsets and beliefs, compensation for parents, creating welcoming spaces, and listening. By engaging in co-design, programs and staff can improve how they respect, how they elevate, and intentionally include diverse family expertise. And they can promote meaningful and sustained engagement, trusting partnerships, and personal and professional growth among parents and staff that match their interests. And Fran has put the link to this resource in the chat as well. It will also be on the slides for you when you get them. So I wanted to share a couple other resources. So in addition to the work that's been done for Head Start specifically, there have also been some innovative work across different communities and different fields around family voice and parent leadership. For example, in the report from Michigan that we discussed earlier, they focused on compensation, on parent leadership training and coaching, peer-to-peer networks for ongoing learning and skill building, and the hiring of parents to fill key roles, inform decisions, and support the development of other parent leaders. And yet another example comes from policy recommendations from the Family Leadership Design Collaborative, which is a national network of scholars, educators, and family community leaders who work together to center racial equity, in family engagement. Their approach is also focused on co-design, stating the importance of engaging multiple perspectives, having an iterative and reflexive learning process that focuses on addressing current priorities and concerns that already exist in the communities that schools serve, all with the goal of creating change and progress toward educational justice and community well-being. Next, we wanted to share some examples of how we incorporate family voice in our own work. So I was going to start with Ready for Pay. We make sure that our methods for gathering family voice are accessible, that they're strengths-based and easy to participate in. When we create new or customized content, we hold listening sessions with community members, including parents. Also, as we mentioned earlier, we administer quarterly parent surveys that are distributed by text, and so they're a very, very low lift for families to complete. We then, as a team, read every single one of families' responses, and we use them to make improvements to our product. Finally, we gather feedback through meetings with our partners, which include districts, schools, community-based organizations, and Head Start programs. And they're able to share more about the unique strengths and needs of their communities and help us to create a community support stream of text messages that are tailored specifically for them. We close the loop by asking families to provide regular input on how useful these resources are and what they find to be most helpful. Sandy, I'll turn it over to you to speak a little bit about Parent Gauge.
Yeah, so with Parent Gauge, it was developed in response to programs asking for support in promoting and measuring family engagement. In that the tool itself is capturing family voice through targeted questions aimed at parents. We did research and studies to validate that the questions themselves are accessible. We offer them in a couple different languages, and we wanted them to be universal and applicable to any program across the nation, right? So that was at the forefront when we were initially developing what are these questions that we're asking? What is this product that we're building? And we did integrate families, guardian, and staff through the development process. So they were included in pilot programs and focus groups early on, and we engaged in a psychometric validation from a third party to ensure that we were meeting those goals. Now, as we continue the development, we review those open responses from families in aggregate to keep that in consideration for future enhancements we can bring to the tool. And we're also paying attention to what is the staff that's directly working with our parents? What do they need? What are they looking for, so that we can make sure that we're including that family voice throughout the product development itself. Now, moving into our next slide, right? We've reviewed some approaches and strategies from other resources and within our roles, mine and Mallory's, but we want to hear from you too. What other approaches or strategies do you use in your role to elevate the voices of families in your program? I'm sure some of them are going to be similar, but it'll be fun to see how in your specific roles, how are you elevating the voices of family? What is your program doing? Policy Council, that's definitely a big one, right? Parent Club Committee, right? We have some organization to this. We have meetings set up so that we can listen to our parents and make sure that they're included there. An open door policy, I love that. So that way, anytime our parents want to come in and give us some insight, we're open to that. Socializations, I think that's huge too, right? So as we have some formal approaches, and then by doing other types of community events or family engagement events that are maybe a little less formal, we learn different things that way too. More open door parent committees, yes. So we're seeing a lot of things that we're using together through different programs to engage parents. That's awesome.
Sandy, can I call a couple others out that I saw?
Go ahead.
The father program, which is great. And what was the other one parent cafes, which is another one that I've heard about, which really is an amazing program. And it's really nicely adapted to different types of programs for those of you who've used it.
Yeah, fatherhood engagement, that's a great one, because it's like when we're talking about diverse families' voices, right? That really helps us hone in on some of the diversities that we see throughout our communities, right? When we're listening to both, all parents.
Yeah, and I see some from Nora about these wellness table talks, and I've never actually experienced that, but I think one of the things we talked a lot about is the importance of wellness for both staff and families, and how important the self-care piece is. So that's wonderful.
Ooh, I also
ambassadors, yay! Shout out to parent ambassadors, love it. Thanks, Heather.
And I love the idea of using social media platforms too, right? Because realistically, that's what we're all looking at every day, right? Utilizing those tools is super important. Weekly yoga class. I love that. That's creative. And that's like not only, that's self-care, that's exploring wellness, connecting to your communities. It's a great idea. Promoting CDA opportunities and parent volunteers. That's huge. Oh man, there's so many great ideas in all of this. Mallory and I were even talking about this chat is going to be great. We might do something with all this information. If anything, create more word clouds and presentation materials that we can share with y'all.
Yeah, and Sandy, I think we're doing great on time, so I think we can let this go for a couple more minutes if you're okay with that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I
Bring
love
your dad
this.
to Head Start
Oh,
again.
that's awesome.
Fatherhood engagement. I love that.
I love it.
It's a great idea.
Parent read aloud. That's wonderful. Hiring parent aides from the kitchen aides. Yeah, that's a great way to create community.
Ooh, depression and trauma screening. That is important. That's huge.
Open air market too. That's
And
wonderful.
on the other side, ice cream socials.
Mhm.
That's great.
Wow, you are doing so many wonderful things. The cultural nights. Love it. Mental health. So important.
Yeah, these are such great idea. Dia de las Familia event. That's amazing. I love that. I'm thinking of all of the things that I wish the schools my kids go to could do. This is amazing. Father-daughter dances. That's awesome. It seems like the male involvement, fatherhood engagement, that seems to be something where a lot of us are working on. That's great to hear.
Yeah, thank you, Mildred. And I don't know if anyone said it before you, but the grandparents always shout out. I mean, how important and wonderful, right? We're talking about, and I meant to say at the beginning, we use parent, we use family, that means a lot of different things for a lot of different families, right? And so grandparents can play an extremely important, awesome role. So.
Ooh, a book library for the family, right? It's not just tailored to the children, but for our families. That's a great idea. All right. Well, thank you all for adding such great responses here. And again, we know that the experience is here. It's collective, right? We're all bringing different things to the table and that we can learn from these opportunities together. I know I'm seeing a lot of great ideas that I haven't necessarily delved into here that I'm definitely going to share with my community that I work with directly. So love that. Thank you so much for participating in our chat here. And we encourage you all to, if you were noticing anything through these chats, keep notes of them. We are going to send you some resources afterwards, but these are definitely things that we'll want to keep in mind as we're planning our upcoming program year and making program decisions and goals. So in conclusion, we went over how you as program leaders play a critical role in including family voice throughout your program and why that's so important. This last part, we were also touching base on what you're already doing there, which is amazing. We went over what the research says, what families are saying directly to us given our various roles, and how family voice plays into meeting performance standards and overall the betterment of our communities, right? Looking at those ideas, I know you're making your communities better, and we're just honing in on that, right? Before we head into Q&A, we'll be sending out an email post-webinar with links to a couple resources on family voice and family engagement. There will also be a reflection sheet that you can bring into other meetings and sessions. So your policy council meetings, these meetings that you were mentioning, we have a reflection sheet that you'll be able to use to keep family voice at the forefront of your efforts. Included in that email will be a short survey. We're linking that in the chat now as well, where you can respond to how you liked this webinar. It takes less than a minute, so feel free to do that now, or it'll also be in that email, so you'll have access to that later as well. If you'd like to hear more specifically about Ready for K and Parent Gauge, there will be a product information session on August 3rd, where we'll go into more detail on those products specifically. So register for that if you want to hear more direct information directly on Parent Gauge and Ready for K. If you're curious what that looks like, if you want to go ahead and just see what kind of questions we're asking, those are all going to be part of that webinar. And with that said, we're going to invite a couple more colleagues to jump into our Q&A session. Fran, who has been in that chat sharing those links is our the Parent Powered Senior Curriculum and Content Specialist. And Lorena focuses on our early childhood partnerships at Parent Powered. So we're going to invite them to join for our Q&A session. Also, if you have any questions, we've been pulling some out of the chat as we've been going along, but if you have any questions you want to add for our Q&A session, we're going to get to as many of them as you can. So feel free to chat them in now, and we're going to see how many of those we can reach today.
Thank you so much. What an amazing presentation, Sandy and Mallory. And to the fellow participants in the chat, I love nothing more than a lively and participatory chat. So a big kudos and a round of applause to everybody participating today. Again, if questions have come up, now is a great time for you to just pop them in the chat. While you're all pondering and reflecting on what questions you do have, I think we can get started with one that I've heard from Head Starts before, and that's, how do you suggest encouraging the lens of family voice in programs that are already feeling overwhelmed?
That's a great question, because that is something, you know, I always think of how we use these examples of programs that have enough bandwidth for everything. We can do it all, right? But realistically, we have places where staff is short. We have a lot going on. We're talking about these cuts that may be coming to Head Start that we're trying to avoid. All of that, you know, there's a lot of overwhelm, of course. There's a lot of people who are doing multiple roles within their singular roles. And given that, I think one thing that we see is successful is there are places where we have to do assessments. We have to meet with our parents. We have to do these certain things, and trying to utilize that time to basically make sure that we're incorporating family voice there. So it's not necessarily something that we have to add to the list as another action item, but instead reviewing what are we already doing and how can we make sure we're lifting up diverse family voices as we're doing that.
I love that. Thank you, Sandy. We've got this really great question about parent participation. How do you increase parent participation, right? People just shared all of these amazing ideas, but how do you get parents to come and to show up for these awesome events? Mallory, I'm going to send this one to you first.
Awesome. Thank you for that question. Was that Nancy who asked that? It's a wonderful question, and one that we've, talked a lot about. I think where I would start there, honestly, is that there are a couple of things. One, there's no, as we know, no one right way to do this. So it has to be right for your community. But one of the things that we've found, if you really lean into kind of this co-design approach, and you really lean into working with a couple of parents, even if it's just a couple, start small at the beginning and have them lead, right? Lead how they want to do this. They know themselves the best. They know their families the best. And so if you can have them, take a leadership role, have them help decide what the best ways to involve families are, and also get input on what families most want to learn about. And you do this, I'm sure, in a lot of different ways already, but really lean into those two things: parents leading, parents connecting. I'm going to do three things. I'm counting wrong. And then the third one would really be to think about leaning into what's important to your families. Because if you hear that and then encourage them to lead that, it's more likely that they will be involved. And I know it's challenging, and I know that it's hard. It's hard, right? Like, everyone has so much going on. I think another thing that programs use that we've talked about is, and Fran mentioned this earlier when we were talking, but providing childcare, providing food, making it at times that's convenient for people. And I think the other piece is being flexible even within your program, right? So each community will have different needs, but there will be different needs within each community. So thinking about, are there virtual ways that maybe we learned from the pandemic that still work for some people better? Are there other people that want to come in? And, people are talking about how important these social connections are. But those are just some initial ideas that I have. I don't know if that's helpful, or if anyone has anything else to add.
I think that echoes a lot of what we're seeing in the chat, right? Is when we feed our families and parents, they're more likely to come, or if we're doing those types of events, because we know that, like, some of the communities we work with, right, they might be food insecure. They might be some resources that we can help with as we're engaging our families that maybe we can incorporate there, and that'll increase family engagement or parent engagement in these events.
I love this response. And I can further validate that in my own community. In my children's elementary school, they finally got parents to start showing up from things when they offered some childcare and some food when they made it at that, 5-6 o'clock hour, which is usually such a harried hour for families. I have Vakeisha Warfield is asking, what is a parent cafe? Sandy or Mallory, can either of you expand on that? And if not, whoever's mentioned parent cafes throughout the chat, can you just hop on and type us a little description, or maybe everyone can chime in.
I think the real experts are just like you said, Fran. I think the people that are doing this, it looks like Cynthia Brown in the chat is talking about this. And if you wanted to respond in chat at all, but my experience with parent cafes that I love about them is that they're bringing together of families, and they're really flexible in what you talk about. So it's based on just what we're saying, how to increase participation is to, based on something that the families already think is important. There's resources online that I can share too around the Parent Cafe program, but I think I'll defer to probably the real experts who are actually implementing this on the ground. Is there anyone who wants to share?
And Cynthia shared a YouTube video on how they to educate their staff about Parent Cafe. So that might be useful there too. We might pull that out and try to share it.
I am just going to re-share this to make sure everyone sees it, but I will not take credit. That was from Cynthia above. I love actually learning from a little video. It just puts everything right into the mode that I know I learn best. Let's move on to another.
I'm sorry, Fran. I was just going to say
question.
one more thing. I was going to put a link into an organization called Be Strong Families. That's a wonderful organization, and they do a lot of great work. They are the Parent Cafe people. So if you want to check them out, I was going to put the link in, but it came up as one of those crazy long links on my computer, so I don't want to put it in there because it'll take like half the chat. So we can share that after as well, or I can try to get a shortened version for you all.
Yeah, and this is a great time to sort of remind everyone that you'll get the presentation, you'll get the links that people are posting that Mallory just talked about, as well as a few other resources as well. So it's also okay if you're sitting back to enjoy this presentation and Q&A. Oh, thank you, Mallory. Let's move on and talk about what kind of data can you review in identifying goals around family voices? How do you sort of gather all of that together to make it happen?
Yeah, that's one where, obviously we're all of us on the webinar today are, we're working either directly for one of our programs, or we're working through, some of the vendors or things like that. So there are tools available that are going to help you find out what data to look at and that kind of thing. I see Tracy bringing up the needs assessment, right? That's huge. And I know a lot of programs are also using those needs assessment types of surveys and questions to dig in deeper into other topics of family voice. And I think using the PFCE framework, that's what we used for Parent Gauge when we were designing, how are we making sure that we're measuring these types of things that are around family voice, around PFCE in particular. That's going to be a great resource. And I'll let y'all chime in if you guys have other ideas there too.
Yeah, it's great. We're seeing needs assessment, Peace at Home parenting program, strengths and needs assessments. These are great.
Yeah, covering topics about mental wellness, protective factors, fatherhood. I love this. Well, you're such a wealth of knowledge, and I mean that has an extended group. So for some of us, depending on where we live, back to school is fast approaching. For others of us, we might have some time before then. But how do you get family input before school starts? We've heard some Head Starts say that it can be a really difficult thing to do, but a super important thing to help sort of get the year kicked off correctly. And you've got people answering questions already.
Yeah, exactly, which is great, right? It's like info sessions, meeting with parents ahead of time, right? And so some of that is when you are doing the registration and enrollment process, building in some sort of check-in from the get-go so that we can start collecting that type of information.
I love that.
And I was
And
going to say
I
too,
love all the surveys, orientations, home visits, very, very important. Just love this wealth of knowledge.
I was going to bring it back to say, you know, thinking about in all of these routines and all of these processes that we use, again, bringing it back to family voice and making it clear that if that's part of what this is. And, you know, one, you know, innovative thing to try, if you haven't already, would be to involve, you know, your parent leaders in planning all these things and to be part of all these processes. Some of you probably already do that really well. And to encourage parent leaders to bring in other family voices so you have diverse voices at the table.
I love that. And I think that leads into sort of a next question that we sometimes get, and that's how and where should we call out the concept of family voice in our current meetings and routines? What do those moments look like? What are those inroads?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that comes to mind in particular is during reflective supervision. So I think in particular for leaders, program leaders who work with staff, family supports professionals and others, that this could be a really, really great place to engage in that parallel process, first of all, and let, you know, staff share kind of some of their hopes and dreams for working with families and children, but also some of their challenges, right? So if you can talk about, and then talk about how to bring family voice into that as well. So I think as staff are, let me see, Dominga said it in the chat, active listening for parents' voices and concerns. You can parallel process that, right, with your staff. So active listening, model that for them, and then they can then do that. But that's something, a routine in particular during reflective supervision or engaging in reflective practice around some of these things could be really useful.
That is so fantastic. I'm just going to do another, because I feel like people in the chat are giving all of this information. I'm wondering if there's any other lingering questions that people have that we can answer while we have Sandy and Mallory here to do so. I will take a moment to just talk about home language came up, meeting people sort of and communicating in their home language. I will take this moment. Sandy, why don't you share the languages that Parent Gauge comes in?
Yeah, so for Parent Gauge, we do have the interviews available in English, Spanish, French, and Arabic. So those are all that are built into the system that make it really easy. If that's their home language, you have those available already set up for that without needing a translation service.
And which is amazing. And I think, so we have some overlap here at Parent Powered Ready for K, where we also do English, Spanish, and Arabic. We don't cover French yet, but I say yet. We also do simplified Chinese and Burmese and Vietnamese and Hmong and Russian and Polish. And we are always actually looking to meet partners where their families are at and what languages their families need. Thank you, Sonia. Shout out for the languages we share. It's a process that is close to my heart because we not only translate, but we also culturally version our messaging so that they really resonate with the families that are receiving them. Well, it looks like we've been able to answer questions. Will there be Haitian? It is on our list. We do have a process of working with partners to do translation. So if that's something you're interested in, you could always reach out to Lorena to discuss that. So I feel like we've covered a lot of amazing territory today. So I'm going to bring our question and answer session to a close, but we're not done just yet. So we have one last really critical activity that we need to do together. And I'm going to turn it back over to Sandy so that she can guide us through that.
Thank you, Fran. So we've spent most of our time today speaking about the importance of family voice, but we also want to stress how important your voice is as well, especially in this critical time where the House Committee has released a bill that includes a significant and alarming reduction to Head Start and early Head Start funding. It's a little over 6%. This budget cut could keep roughly 80,000 children and families from receiving Head Start services. So please take a moment to scan the code on your screen and share it with everyone you can. It will navigate you to send an email to your representative, letting them know you oppose this cut to Head Start and early Head Start funding. You can scan it right from their phone. It'll take you to the website. Super simple. It'll have you just put in your name, email address. It's got templates already available for you, so it could be really quick. And you can submit this every 24 hours. So, feel free to set an alarm so that you are sending it every morning. We want to make sure that the House of Representatives knows that we don't want this to happen. This will only take a couple minutes, and your voice will help us continue our mission of serving every child. So with that, thank you so much for attending our webinar today. I think we have such a wealth of information, right? That's something that we keep mentioning throughout our Head Start family here, and we want that to continue. You'll see us around. We're going to have a couple of other webinars similar to this. Like I said, that info session is coming up. And if you have any other questions or concerns, let us know. But please, by all means, use your phones to go ahead and scan that URL. Let's make sure that they know we don't want this cut to happen. Thank you.
Thank you all.